Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So, in this game, we're playing 23 Dragons in the Friday night simuls I usually have. So, if you're out there and you're thinking you don't have an opponent to play, come on at 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific time and just challenge this account, Pooh 2012. Right here, Pooh 2012. So, let us begin. Knight f3, knight f6, b3, g6. So, this is what I usually recommend white players do. Now, you might ask me, why do you recommend something that does not control the center at all, right? It doesn't go here, it doesn't go here. Well, the reason is because I think that the center is a very big place for action. But if your opponent does not do anything in the center, then why do you have to do anything in the center? Right? Maybe we can save the center challenge for later. That's what we did in this game. But after bishop b2, there's g3, bishop g2, castles, and then eventually you can play the move c4, right? And then so let me just highlight the arrows again. Castles c4, d4, and then you get a game. So that's later on. But after bishop b2, bishop g7, I played the move e4 because I just thought, knight takes bishop, and if castles, I will play queen e2. Although this is not the move I usually play. I usually play a different move, but just in case any of my opponents are watching, I won't reveal it. So after e4, black castles, and I play the move e5 because, number one, I want to exert pressure, right? The way you can intimidate people is by pushing your pawns to threaten your opponent's pieces. That's obviously they're going to be shaken by the fact that you are pushing very hard, right? But they are also going to wonder at how they can take advantage of you pushing very hard. So you got to combine those sort of things and sort of recognize that, okay, I'm pushing, but I don't want to push too hard. So after knight d5, I play the move c4, and after knight b6, I play the very weird looking move h4. So at this point, I intimidate our chess club member 23 Dragons once again. You can see that I don't even bother to develop my bishop. First thing I do is play h4, and I want to play h5. Now that's obviously looks threatening, but is it really that threatening? Well, the answer is it's not really that threatening, because after a simple move like d6, you can see that, black is going to put pressure in the center. And if black starts putting pressure in the center, and the center breaks open one day, this king is going to be the fool of them all. So to me, this move is no harm. So what I would do in a game is I would play the move d6, or I would play the move knight c6. But for safekeeping, our 23 Dragons played the move h5. Now, I played the move d4, and I was briefly also considering the move c5, and after knight d5, bishop c4, also what I was considering, so I played d4 instead, just to reinforce my e5 pawn, and after d6, I was like, okay, well, if I play bishop e2, d takes, knight takes, there's a possibility that black is going to trade queens. And I'm sort of realizing my position that, okay, the bishop can come here, and the knight is starting to develop, and I can see that slowly I'm starting to lose the grip in this position. So my opening setup was intimidating, but 23 Dragons dealt with it very well. So after knight bd2, knight c6, play e takes d6, e takes, bishop e2, rook e8, very, very good, putting pressure on the open file. Also another move, like mentioned before, is bishop g4, just putting pressure on d4. But after rook e8, I castled very weirdly, but I thought I had no choice, and after bishop g4, rook e1, now my goal is very odd, but my goal is get this knight to e3, and by getting the knight to e3, I want to keep this guy protected, but I also want to keep the guy on h4 protected, so I'm going to have to make a few moves. Knight f1, knight e3, g3, queen d2, so it's going to be a long process, and that's the goal of mine. But after queen d7, I also start to worry about, okay, one day I want to play the move d5, right? Because one day black is going to play d5, and then after c5, black is going to reroute this knight, so that the knight can get here one day. So one day black will play d5 and then reroute the knight to e4, and black will have a wonderful position. So I'm not going to allow that. I want to play rook b1 first to eventually just play d5 right away. Bishop f5 happens, I play rook c1, and now knight b4 occurs. And at this point, I'm sort of uncomfortable with my position because, number one, the pawn is threatened, and number two, knight d3, and I'm going to have to give up one of my bishops. So after a3, knight d3, bishop takes d3, rook takes e1 was the biggest surprise of them all, and after knight takes e1, our 23 dragons did resign because after bishop takes, the knight can recapture. So essentially, if the bishop captured here, this would still be much of a game. So let's say I continued with my idea, bringing the knight to e3. I play knight f1, right? And then after rook takes e1, queen takes e1, I'm going to bring my knight to h6. I mean, not h6, e3. So after rook e8, knight e3, bishop e4, knight g5, d5. Now this is a game, and who knows where it could have gone from here, but what can we learn from this game? Well, we can learn that my pawn pushes were more likely to become weaknesses than they were with aggressive intention. And so you can see that 23 Dragons was not afraid at all and really developed a really great setup, but unfortunately that one mistake cost the game. So going on to our next game against 23 Dragons, I played a Sicilian Khan variation. So after e6, b3 occurred. And at this point, I was out of theory. I didn't know what to do. So I played knight c6, bishop e2, and I played d6. Now, I could have obviously played d5. E takes d5, e takes d5, and the move d4. But this is completely fine. Some sort of isolated pawn variation for black, but I opted for d6. Now, the reason why I opted for d6 was because I kind of felt like this pawn should stay on d6. Number one, I want to prepare the move knight f6. So just in case if white plays e5, I'll have this pawn to interact with the other pawn. After bishop b5, I played queen c7. The idea of queen c7 is really, for now, just to bring the queen out. It's also to support the knight, but more importantly, just bring the queen out. So after bishop takes c6 now, remember, every time you trade, you want your trade to benefit yourself, right? So in this case, you have to ask yourself before you trade, what is the benefit of bishop takes knight, right? And so in this case, I would say the bishop is worth more than this knight right now. I feel like in general, since this is an open position, bishops can utilize this long diagonal. One day white can open up the position with d4, so I feel like the bishop would have a lot more potential than the knight. So bishop takes c6, queen takes c6, d3, and at this point we're slowly developing. And after the move e5, I told you about this pawn on d6, does a good job of challenging. D takes, knight takes, queen c7, knight df3. So 23Dragons is doing a very good job of incorporating the pieces into the game and just letting me know that, okay, white has territorial control in the center. So how do I get around that, right? So first thing I do is I want to coordinate the rest of my pieces. First thing I do is play b6 and get the bishop out. So after d4, I decide there's no harm. So I play bishop b7. And according to 23Dragons, this was a misclick. So after bishop takes d5, well, apparently, according to the computer, e takes d5. Nope, e takes d5, and building this pawn wall with d4 was probably more preferred, but it really depends. So after d5, I took with the bishop because I wanted to keep the bishop on an open diagonal. And after c4, bishop b7, queen e2, rook a d8. And at this point, I am just slowly trying to consolidate this pawn that 23Dragons accidentally gave away. So you can see that I'm not doing much here. So after knight e4, what I'm doing is giving space for my bishop to come on f6. Rook takes, rook d1, I happily trade, and after f6, I challenge this knight on e5, and I say, you know what, you can retreat so I can come to this file. But our 23Dragons goes with a very bold queen d7, and after queen takes, I play the move bishop d6, and at this point, you can see that my next threat is bishop c6, and the knight has nowhere to go. So the knight ventured into a very dark territory. So what do we learn in this game? Well, really, I would say that it was all due to this one move misclick, right? The game could have gone much differently if the pawn had not been lost, because the pawn, like, even though sometimes you'll be like, oh, I'm up material, but I have compensation for it. In this case, we're trading everything down, and by trading everything down, we can see that by playing with a pawn up, it's going to make life a little bit more easier, knowing that if you simplify all these pieces, you'll eventually get a winning position with the pawn up. So in endgames, having a pawn up is a good thing, and here we also got the knight trapped as well. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.